Welcome to the Model Car Hobby Podcast with your host, Luka C. Now here he is, Luka C.
So you ended up getting into the truck series. You're still building models, right? You never stopped building models.
You know, I was late model racing, and I was helping Ray Young and Clay Heiberger with what they called full force enterprises. You know, Ronnie Newman had started building a house, and he wasn't able to race, and there was, and I wanted to race. There was a little bit of a, we'll call it a debacle, and I went on to help somebody else. I was back to the Thunderbird. I was at the car wash one night cleaning up the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
And this lady pulls up and she says, "Do you know who I am?" And I says, "Yeah." I said, "You're Tony McGuire's wife." And she said, "No, girlfriend." I kind of realized really that was that there was a subject there, we'll say. And she and Tony had just gotten the WDBJ Channel 7 sponsorship. They were looking for one more person to help on his car. And she said, "Tony's been trying to figure out how to get a hold of you and talk to you. He realized that you wasn't helping Ronnie no more. They had seen that, you know, I worked on Ronnie's car and was a hard worker and was always working on the car." So she said, "Tony wants you to call him." So I called him and talked to him, you know, and I met up with him and his brother. And actually, you know, I had raced against them both and had conversations with them at the racetrack, but nothing, you know, get to know somebody. So I went down and got to know them on a Saturday and got to look at the shop. And, you know, Tony said, we'd like for you to come help us. So, well, I would like to, you know, help y'all. I said, when the whole deal happened with Ronnie, my dad was, you know, he was like, "Well, maybe you ought to go talk to this person and go talk to that person." And I worked with a guy that was helping on Ray Young's car at that time. And where Ronnie wasn't racing full time or wasn't able to run a lot of races, I asked AJ, would he talk to Clay and see if I could go help him when Ronnie wasn't racing. Clay didn't want somebody from another team, you know, coming in, seeing what they were doing. And
right.
You know, so when the deal went south, I said, you know, "Hey, I'm not helping him now. Could I maybe come help y'all?" "Well, yeah, sure." So I finished out the season with them, and that's when I met Larry Dunn. Larry Dunn was the team manager for that deal. And, you know, I remember having several conversations with Larry, and he was glad that I was there helping. But I remember, too, when this deal went with Tony and him, you know, I told him, I said, I think there's a lot better opportunity for me to learn to advance, to get on to where I wanted to go. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't get to go to work in the truck series until 2005 full time.
Okay.
I did go to some truck races with Ronnie Newman in 98 when he was running his truck.
Yeah.
I went and started helping Tony in 95, and that was just that experience was overwhelming to a certain point. Both those brothers had cars. Paper, it was two race teams to a certain point, but I mean, they were owned by the same two guys. Timmy had his stuff, Tony had his stuff, but at the end of the day, it was all their stuff. The funny part about that was Tony had the WDBJ 7 sponsorship, Timmy had the Channel 10 sponsorship.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah. So the first year, Timmy's stuff was kept. Well, they were both kept in the same shop, because the first year I was just helping. The second year in 96, that's when they actually hired me to go to work there.
Oh, and it became a real job.
It became in 96, it became a full-time get paid job. I'll tell you what changed a lot of that. There was, at the end of 95, we were getting ready to go to Martinsville for the big late model stock race. You know, they had done it was just the late model stock car race now. There was no Busch cars, no modifieds. And Tony, he played touch football on Sundays. 2 weeks before the race, he was playing and he broke it. He actually went to catch the ball, and the ball hit him in the thumb and broke his thumb. I remember coming to the shop, and I walked in, and he's in a cast. And he says, man, I'm going to really need you to help me. I said, okay. He said, we got a lot of maintenance to do. And as you can see, where it hit him was like between the thumb and the wrist. So, I mean, he was in a hand cast.
Okay.
So, that meant, he was going to be there kind of looking over my shoulder, but a lot of the physical work I was, going to, and we had other help, but I was, I was able to come to the shop about every night. So we prepped the car for Martinsville, went to the test, came back home, worked on the car some more, went down there to run that race, and it was really weird. Normally qualifying was on Saturday. It rained on Saturday, and they moved qualifying till Sunday morning at 9:00. Back then, there was no jet dryers. Just all they had was a street sweeper for over there.
Oh, yeah.
So they cleaned the track off best they could. We was the third car out at 9:00 in the morning. Did not qualify very good, and had to run the heat race. We weren't going to make it in the heat race. We finished 6th. We noticed something with the car that finished in front of us. Prior to this, 2 years, they used to let us have a opening in the hood that was 2 by 22. I think is what it was, 2 by 20 or 2 by 22. Well, instead of making people buy new hoods, they let them cover it up. Well, when these guys made their plate to cover it up, they fixed it to where the front of it would open up and air would still go under the hood and help get better air to the carburetor. But when they pulled us all in, we noticed this opening in the hood was open. You could see, under the hood. Well, we pointed it out, and they went over there and checked it out, and seeing that, it was allowing air under that guy's hood, they disallowed that guy from the heat race, and we got in the show. We were going home. I mean, we were not going to make this race.
Wow.
And that was, that was so we were in the show and start running the race. And we're kind of coming up through the field there. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're leading this thing. And gets down to just a few laps to go. And him and Elliott Sadler had this pretty good battle. And we wound up finishing second. And they take Elliott in the tire building, tech shed there, and they start pulling his motor apart. And they check the stuff on our car, and we pushed our car back over to the trailer. We done got the toolbox strapped down. Car was kind of starting up the ramp, and the official come over there, and he says, we noticed some of their people come by our trailer crying. And we thought, man, they're still excited about winning this race. And about that time, that official says, hey, you boys bring that car back over to the tech. No, they said we was good. No, he was wrong. Now we're going to find out if y'all are. And it was so weird. We finished second at Martinsville, and I thought this was just the greatest thing in the world. Tony's sitting there in that trailer, man, and he is just he's really upset. And I'm like, dude, we just finished second. He's like, man, you don't know how much money I just left on the table. And I started thinking about what second place paid versus what it was $25,000 to win that race back then.
Yeah.
So I think we about carried that car over to the tech building and got in there and started pulling the engine out of it, and what they wanted to look at. They wanted to look at the heads and stuff like that. Elliott Sadler had angle milled heads,
which
was a big no. And I remember Elliott saying, he said, man, I should have known something was up when Jack Tant, which that was his engine builder, he said, I won the race, and that man left. He didn't even hang around. So, which our engine builder was Lawrence Poff, and our crew chief was Lawrence Poff. So Lawrence was right there with the motor. And It's kind of funny. There's not a lot of Victory Lane pictures with that deal because it was well into the darkness when we left there.
Oh yeah.
And the car didn't even go to Victory Lane. They just took all of us down there with the clock and took a picture. But that was pretty cool. That's the first time being over there and winning a grandfather clock and being a part of that. And,
oh man,
and knowing I had
a clock. See that was so cool how they treated the late model divisions and stuff like that.
Yeah, because they got the same grandfather clock that the Cup guys do. I mean, matter of fact,
cool.
It's kind of funny because when Paul Radford won the doubleheader in the modified and the Busch car, it was Lawrence's car he was driving.
Right.
And Paul took both clocks. He gave one to his sister, and he kept one. Well, Tony had always promised Lawrence that if we won that race, he would give him the clock.
Oh, yeah.
So Tony did. Tony actually gave Lawrence the original clock, and then he ordered him another duplicate so he would have one too.
How cool.
But it was really interesting. We went into the 96 season. I didn't go to work for him right off the bat, and it was a few months into 96. So over the winter, I still went down there and helped Tony, refurbish the cars when I would get off from work, and work on stuff and get ready for the 96 season. Went back to Martinsville. It's really weird. We finished second again at Martinsville. And we finished second to a guy by the name of Donnie Apple. And those guys are in there. They're tearing his motor down. And, I mean, it is taking forever. And we found out later on that the officials were they wanted to throw Donnie Apple out because his heads were wrong. Clay Campbell said, I'm not doing this 2 years in a row, and that television car win, because DBJ was a big supporter of the Martinsville Speedway. He said, something would look, and being on the outside looking in, I would think something was a little suspicious too. It's kind of like at Pulaski County or New River Valley. We always thought Sheeler had a big hand in up there, and Sheeler, that car had an advantage up there. And then looking back, it's that's just the way racers are.
Yeah.
If somebody's getting beat, there's always a reason that guy's beating us, and it's because he's got some kind of advantage that we don't. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's just because it's just his time to win, and he's doing good, and luck's on his side. In my mind, I had aspirations of trying to go to work for a truck team and be working for one by about 97. And I was learning so much about working on those cars, and I was seeing that the opportunity was there. I was making a living doing it. I was getting to work on the stuff.
How cool is that to be working on getting paid to work on race cars?
Right. I mean, it was a dream come true. It's what I wanted to do. And, and I was getting to still live in my hometown. I mean, that was kind of the cool thing. We had some deals we were doing where we were doing some customer work for people, so it was a good deal, for quite a bit of time. Looking back, I wish now I would have tried to go ahead and find a truck team and went to work for it. Because once again, when you get around those guys and you start talking to the people that have been in the truck series for a long time and hearing how that, I never will forget when I went with Ronnie Newman in 98, I think it was, there was only like about 7 or 8 templates that went on the trucks. When I went to work for Jim Harris in 2005, I think they had 33 templates.
Holy cow, really?
Yeah, I mean, of different, I believe it was either, it might have been 28, but there was way more templates in 2005 than what it was in 1998. In 2001 or 2002, I had spoke with a friend of mine about trying to go to work for a cup team or maybe a truck team, or he suggested at the time the motorsports program had started up at Patrick Henry Community College. And he said, you really ought to take that. He said, that would give you, some education, a diploma, something, to show. And plus, I mean, it was a community deal. It would help me on my educational side of it. So I contacted the instructor and was talking to him, and it was kind of funny because he didn't know my name, but he knew. When we got to talking, he said, "Well, if you think this NASCAR thing is what you're interested," and I said, "Well, I'm the guy that works for Tony and Tim McGuire," and he's like, "I know who you are now." He said, "I didn't recognize your name." So I go over there and start taking classes. They were night classes.
Okay, so what year is this again?
This would have been 2002.
Okay, but you started working on race cars kind of sort of at 11 years old in 1984.
Yes, sir.
But you're going to go to school to work on race cars.
I mean, it was really.
It helps, right?
Yeah. I mean, part of it was, and I'll back up to where that's where I wish I would have just went down there at a young age, right out of high school.
Yeah.
And just went down there and swept floors until somebody would actually let me bolt something on a car, whatever it would have took to got in the door. Because there's so many people that I met and talked to that said, yeah, it's like, well, did you help somebody locally for, and decide, no, I found out they was hiring over here and I started out cleaning parts.
Yeah.
Or I started out, they let me clean the shop, and, finally there was guys that started showing me how to put stuff together, and, I caught on to it, and next thing they're a good mechanic or a crew chief or a fabricator in the truck series. They had moved up. During this time that the college was going on taking these classes, Mike Sharp
was kind of a big thing at that time period. I remember there was also even NASCAR was starting a college they were like
right. That's yes, it was. That was a big.
It was almost like people thought you go to that school and then you had a direct line into a major team, whether it be
yes, and it didn't. It wasn't like that. It was it just like I have kind of found out. If you told people you went to school for racing, kind of like what you just touched on a minute ago. Oh, you had to go to school to learn how to do that. Here's the truth about those classes. A lot of times Mike had me showing people in that. Well, I tell you what Mike said to me. When I told him who it was, he goes, "I need you in my class." And we kind of got to talking. He goes, "Hey, when are y'all running again?" And I said, "Well, we're running that big 200 lap race." He said, "We'll be there too." He said, "Come down and talk to me." So I went down and talked to him, after qualifying, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "I thought I knew who you was." He said, "You need to come over Monday and sign up." He said, "We'll get you signed up for classes." Okay, so I go over, get signed up, go to the first class, or first, I can't remember how many semesters you had to take of it to get all your credits to graduate, but was there for the first one, and Mike starts telling me about, he said, "We're going to get you a grant to take this." I said, "A grant?" He said, "Yeah." He said, we're going to get you a tobacco grant. And I'm like, okay, well, I thought I had to apply for it, and I tried to, and I didn't get it. He goes, "What do you mean you didn't get it?" I said, "I didn't get the grant." He said, "We'll fix that." So the first 2 semesters I had to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And after he got involved, there was no more me paying for semesters. I got a tobacco grant.
Yeah. Just because you were more help to teaching than you were there learning.
Yes, and that was the thing. I mean, there was different aspects of it. There was chassis, there was fab, there was setup. I mean, he had different parts of it, but a lot of times he would just say, "Hey, if you don't mind, can you come to this one? We're going to be doing this, and I'm going to get you to help me with some of these students, like we were building a chassis," and he was like, "You can show them how to bend tubing and how to fit tubing and stuff like that." That became. I will tell you this: the first night over there, I get there, and he's got an old chassis that's been wrecked, and he's got every power tool, cutting torch drill, you can imagine he's got it outside. And I got there and I was like, okay, what are we doing? He goes, you ain't got to do this. I said, no. No. I said, if this is part of the class, I said, I want to participate in this just like I don't know what I'm doing. This is my first day.
Right.
Never seen one. He said, let me take you inside and talk to you for a minute. I said, all right. So we go in and talk. He said, you know what the Trade Act deal is? I said, no, sir. He said, well, over here, and I didn't know that the Martinsville economy was this bad at the time. He said,
really?
Yeah, because all them furniture and textiles deals had done left the county,
Right.
went overseas. And he was telling me, he said, I was victim of it. He said, your buddy dropped out of school 2 weeks later. He's driving a brand new car because he went to work in the furniture factory. He said, we thought these factory jobs was going to be here forever.
Yep.
He said, and a lot of us we're not very educated because we quit school. He said, lo and behold, they take these jobs overseas. It ain't nothing for us to do now. So he said, people are taking these classes over here. He said, you'll see me signing off on people's stuff. He said, a lot of these people are getting money for taking college classes.
Right.
He said, so I got people in. I said, so you mean there's not other racers in this class like me? He said, there's a few, but most of them ain't never operated a power tool in their life.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is going to be interesting. But there was people that was willing, there was some people there that you could just tell. I mean, they would have took quilting if that's what they,
Whatever
they
it
could have
takes
got.
to get a check, right?
Yes, sir. But there was some people who really, they were like, hey, I'd like to learn more about this, even if I just went to work in a body shop here in town.
Yeah.
So Mike starts telling me that, this is okay. So I think I finally finished the class up in the spring of 2004. He starts telling me about a truck team that's possibly going to be moving to Martinsville. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, it's going to be Joey Arrington's going to build a building over there behind his facilities, and they're going to be over there. It's going to be a Dodge deal. I was like, all right, and I'm kind of asked from time to time. It's like, hey, has, we heard any more about the truck? Oh, yeah, it's happening. The state's going to be involved. Lo and behold, Tony, he calls me up and he says, hey, I'm going to drive this guy's car at Motor Mile this weekend, or New River Valley. He says, we'll go up there and help me. I was like, yeah, sure. So we go up there, and this guy, name's Bob Unser, and he's got a Townsend car, like we got. Frank Denny had been driving for him, and Frank had kind of started into his own deal, and Bob was looking for somebody to start driving his car. So we drove it at Motor Mile that night, or Tony did, and it went okay, So Tony says, Bob wants me to run his car at Martinsville. I said, oh, okay. So I know Tony told me the night he drove the car at New River Valley, he said the seat hurt his back. He said, I want to put my seat in that car. And I said, well, you think maybe Bob will bring the car here? He said, no. He said, Bob wants us to just bring my seat to Martinsville. We're going to put it in over there that morning for the test. Okay, so we get there, the car ain't got no seat in it. We bring our seat in. I'm mount Tony's seat in there. Luckily, Rick used the same brackets, in all his cars. So a lot of it was just the spacers and the bolts, bolted in, adjust the belts. Car's pretty good, but Bob's old engine ain't really that great. And we had a deal with Danny Cox at the time. So Tony makes a deal with Danny to get Danny's motor, his house motor, for the race weekend. Well, we put it in and we run the first practice, and it keeps blowing water out of it. So we thought a lot of it had to do with the style of radiator that Bob had in the car. So I went to the racing parts guy, which was right here in Rocky Mount, and got a Ron Davis double pass radiator, made all the lines up at night based off our Townsend car, went back to the track on Saturday morning and put a radiator and lines and a cooling tank on it like we run to try to help the overheating problem. Brought that stuff back to the track. We put it in the car, run another practice. It's still throwing water out of it. We finally found out the radiator cap was what was bad.
Uh-huh.
It had just done went bad. And it was weird because when it would spew the water out, it wouldn't burn you. You know, it wasn't really steaming, it wasn't hot, and that's kind of how we figured
Just
out
wasn't holding the
it was.
pressure.
Yeah, it wouldn't hold the pressure. So it really, you know, it wasn't that it was overheating. It couldn't build no pressure. Changed the radiator cap, and I never will forget this because by this time I had done met my wife, and I told her, I said, you know, we're going to go over here and race, and I said I'll meet you for dinner, you know, later on. And then and lo and behold, we won this race, and I think we started like 17th that day or something, and got up to like 5th or 6th at halfway.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did their little inversion, and that put us like 4th. And by about 20 laps into it, we were leading and wound up winning the 2004 late model race. So it was kind of interesting. We won that race, and you know, Bob was all about. He was like, you know, we went Motor Mile, or Newer Valley was still having a big 200 lap race. We went to that one, and Bob was like, you know, I really want to see how this deal goes with you and Tony, because I think we're going to come here and run full time next year with him. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, that'll be cool, you know. So I'm kind of, you know, this truck deal, you know, we're getting into December of 04. I ain't heard nothing about it. Probably not going to happen. I guess it fell apart. About the second week of January, I get a phone call from Mike Sharp. He says, hey, can you come to Martinsville tomorrow? And I'm like, tomorrow? He's like, yeah. He goes, they done hired a crew chief for this guy, and he's going to be doing interviews tomorrow. So I called in sick. I didn't really know what to do, you know. I didn't know whether to tell them I was going for this. I just called in sick. Went to the interview, and that's when I first met Fred Graves, which is Andy Graves' dad, you know, from Hendrick Motorsports.
Mm-hmm.
He was Terry Labine, and you know, Fred was Ron Hornaday's crew chief when he was at the Napa truck, you know, at DEI.
Right.
And Fred's going to be the crew chief on this thing, and he says, well, you know, he had some other interviews to do. And most of the people that he was interviewing, I knew. Friday, I come to work, and I think Timmy could tell that, you know, I wanted to. That ain't where I wanted to be.
Right.
He says, I'm going to do you a favor. He says, I'm going to technically lay you off. That way you can collect unemployment, and you can go search for a job at some race teams. You can, you know, go to Carolina and talk to some people. You'll still have some income coming in, but you'll be able to. I was like, okay. So I really didn't say nothing about the truck team. I just, you know, was like, okay. Well, the next day I get a phone call from Fred, and he's like, hey, you know, I'm going to hire you. You know, this is what we're going to start you at. He said, when can you start? And I was like, I can be there Monday. He's like, oh, really? I said, yeah. I said, people I was working for, they're really flexible about this.
That's cool.
And just left it at that, you know. And so Monday morning, I mean, I drive to the first shop we was in was just a little bit past Martinsville. It was actually in a little town called Axton. And we were there for probably about a month until they got our shop finished behind Arrington's building. We moved into that shop. We went to Daytona. We were still at the shop in Axton. We went to California. We were still at the shop in Axton. And then Atlanta. We went to Daytona, California, and Atlanta. And then we took like 3 weeks off before Martinsville. That was the first 4 races then. Mm-hmm. So we moved into the shop in Martinsville and, you know, got it set up and got ready for Martinsville. But 2005, I went to work full time, you know, for what was called HT Motorsports, which was owned by Jim Harris of Harris Trucking in Lynchburg, Virginia. And Mr. Harris was part of the deal that when Stacy Compton first got his first Cup deal, where Stacy had his own car, Jim was kind of part owners in on that deal.
Oh, okay. All right.
So it's kind of, Mr. Harris, he had quite a connection in racing. He had that Cup team that Stacy made the Martinsville race in sometime in the probably 99 or 98, somewhere in
Right.
there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And then, kind of like me and you talked, Stacy went on to get the Kodiak, the old Melling team, the
Yeah.
92 Kodiak car.
Yeah. I remember that was a good looking car too.
Mark Melling was good friends with Jim, and that was part of that deal where Stacy drove the 92 car, and it was all of, they all knew each other. Mark would sponsor us at the Daytona race every year, pretty much, and he would come to Daytona. Mark, Harry's one of Harry's sons,
Ah.
and it was kind of interesting to get to talk to him a little bit. We started out, we went to Daytona, and the deal was, we were going to practice pitting. They were renting pit crew people at first, and then as we went on with the first standalone event, we were going to pit our own truck, and they needed somebody to hand second can at Daytona. So I got a fire suit and handed second can. Well, when we started doing pit practice, I was the only one that was really big enough that could jack the truck up. It takes some oomph to work one of them jacks.
Right.
So we practiced for quite a while with me jacking.
That's a stressful job.
It is. I mean, it's kind of funny because we went to Gateway, was our first standalone event. We pitted the thing for the first time, and we did okay. We had some hiccups, but I mean, it was our first deal.
Mm-hmm.
Wound up finishing fifth there. And then the next event that we were supposed to pit the thing would have been Mansfield, Ohio. And I remember after that race, Fred said, "We knew y'all were going to make some mistakes. We just didn't know y'all were going to make them all in one race." And I mean, so the first pit stop, I jumped way too early, got called back for that. Went out on the racetrack. We was running pretty good before the first pit stop, and went out for after the first pit stop. And I mean, Robert said, "This thing is driving terrible." Well, somehow or another, we got the tires mixed up, and we put the lefts on the right and the rights on the left.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would
So
drive.
it went downhill from there. And I mean, it was a catastrophic weekend. We rebounded. Fred came to me and he said, we had some problems with the fuel. He said, "There's a young boy that's taking classes over here at the college." He said, "If I hired him to jack and got you to fuel," he said, "would that hurt your feelings?" And I said, "No." I said, and if it's going to make us better. Plus, Critter was young. I mean, Critter, I don't think Critter was but like 19. So he was a young, able-bodied person. He was a whole lot more physically than and it takes somebody pretty physical to run around the truck with a jack.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it. What little I did do some jacking on some things, but nothing like a pit stop. And that was,
Yeah.
I always figured that would be a stressful job. I wouldn't want to be a pit.
Well, this one cat tried to show me some stuff at Charlotte that he worked on that 59 Bush car and was the jack man. But that dude, he had legs like a giraffe. I mean, he said basically in about 4 strides you need to be able to get around the truck. And I'm thinking, well, 4 strides for you and 4 strides for me are a lot different.
Yeah.
We had an old car we were using for pit stops, and we had fixed it to where we could dump cans of water in it for to practice with the fuel can. So we practiced like that for a while. Never will forget, Dover was my first race fuel. I remember all I could see was the fuel. That was it. I mean, when the caution come out, I wanted to pick the fuel can up and be sitting on the wall with it. That was the biggest mistake I ever made.
Oh, really?
And there was a guy by the name of Bill Johnson. He was our truck driver, and he had done some fueling. He told me, he said, "You need to wait." He said, "I will give you the fuel can when the time is right." And I didn't want to. I wanted to have the fuel can. I didn't want no hiccups. And I mean, by the time it was time to pit that thing, that fuel can, I mean, I felt like, I had just run a marathon because I'd been holding this 85 pound fuel can, for what seemed like 2 hours. So I stood up. I did what I was supposed to do. I got the fuel in the truck, no problem. But Bill told me, he said, that's the reason I told you. He said, go over there and sit on the wall. He said, when they call pit road is open, he said, I will bring the can to you and you can get ready. So, okay, I see. Yes, sir. I see what you are trying to say. The other thing I started doing when we had pit stop practice was, usually you had your fuel cans sitting on a rack and you picked them up from the rack. I started practicing with the water cans, picking them up from the ground to work on the body strength. Water weighs more than fuel. So a full water can was about 90 pounds, where a full fuel can, I think, was only 84, 83, something like that. But within, a few weeks of lifting that can the way I was doing it from the ground, it helped it's a big deal when you get that can and you got to hold it up. One of the first things, if when you plug in, you'll sometimes start leaking, and you want to bring the top of the can down. But the thing is to put the can up to kind of push it forward, and it will seal up better. And it took me a couple times, because I thought it wasn't sealing at the bottom, and it was actually not sealing at the top.
Right.
But within a few races, I got to where, the tunnel vision opened up and I could see more of the pit stop. Because when you do two cans, when you see the rear tire hanger come up, you want to have your catch can man have possession of the can, and you're going back for the second can. So when the changer and the carrier go by, you basically just follow them by and replug in and finish and install the second can and get it. Normally our pit stops didn't take full two cans. It would be usually 1.5 a can.
Right.
Very, very seldom. Sometimes we would do green flag stops, and you would be close enough that it would just about take all of the second can. But most of the time it was just a shot out of the second can to finish. But I really enjoyed the fueling part of it and got to do that for 2 years. And then at the end of the 06 season, they asked me would I stay back at the shop and build trucks instead of going to the racetrack. They had hired some younger guys to go to the track, and I really didn't like that. I wanted to be at the track and see what was going on, but it's kind of funny because people started telling me, well, that's what you really aim for, is to get a shop job and you don't have to go to the racetrack. Once I realized that was kind of a good opportunity there. And I still, in 2008, we had an issue. They hired a truck driver, and he made a couple mistakes and they had to let him go, and he was supposed to be fueling on the standalone events, and they asked me would I go back and fuel the rest of the season for the standalone events, and I agreed to it, which was cool because I got to go back to some of the racetracks and be a part of it again. I think that year, 2008, we also ran 2 trucks at Homestead. I got to go there with the second team, as you would call it, and be a part of that, work on that truck. And, that deal lasted from 2005 to 2009. It seemed like it was longer than that, but we ran 2 full-time trucks in 2009 with David Starr and Terry Cook. And at the end of that, Mr. Harris decided that it was time for him to close his team. I was very fortunate. At the end of the season, he kept 3 people. I was one of them, to close up shop would be a good way to say it.
Right.
We got to a certain point and he asked, had certain things been done? And I said, yes. And he said, well, I need you to go ahead and lay the other 2 off. And when I asked about myself, he said, well, I'm going to let you, he said, you live there close. I'm going to let you continue to work there and pack up more stuff. And I'm going to have people coming to buy stuff, the stuff's going up for sale. And I'll let you sell it. You'll be there. You'll be answering questions, and people will be coming to see you. Well, it was okay. It was still a job. The only thing, the racing pipeline was kind of cut off.
Right. Yeah.
But about that time, Tony and Timmy McGuire, the older brother, had a son. See, Michael was born in 96. He really had a big interest in racing, and he was go-kart racing when I was working there, for the McGuires, for Tony
Mhm.
and Tim. And Michael had run a lot of Virginia State and Tennessee State races while I was truck racing. And about 2008, he decided they built him a mini stock, and he was starting to run mini stocks. I was going to the track and helping them a little bit with that. And in 2009, he decided he would run. He raced in Orange County and won the limited sportsman track championship down there. He would have been 13, I think, 12 or
Wow.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a good little race car driver. So I was going and helping them, once again as a volunteer, and I was working for Mr. Harris, selling his stuff. 2010, we ran limited sportsman at New River Valley, New River Valley. I guess it was Sheeler by that time.
Yeah,
Sheeler
at that
Motor
point,
Mile.
Sheeler Motor Mile.
Yeah, and we won the very last limited. We didn't run all the rounds. We only ran a few. We won the very last limited sportsman race up there of the year, and they changed the age that you could compete in late model over the winter. And I can't remember. I think maybe you could be 15 or 14 or something, maybe even 13. It was a really young age.
Wow.
And so Timmy called me and he said, "Hey,"
Jeez.
he said, "Won't you go ahead and give Mr. Harris your notice?" He said, "Let's come on over here and let's get to work on these cars." And he said, "We're going to run Michael for the late model deal at Motor Mile in 2011. So we ran full time 2011, running the late model stock car at Motor. I mean, we tested every week. That if there was a race there, we was there on Friday.
So you're back to working full time
Yeah.
now with the McGuires.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm living in Rocky Mount. I'm married, because that was one of the things that got married. When I was working with the truck team, that was kind of a funny deal. 2006 was at Homestead, left Homestead Saturday morning, flew back to Charlotte, drove from Charlotte to Raleigh, flew from Raleigh to Vegas, and got married Sunday morning in Vegas in 2006 in November. That was kind of and that was I was flying to Vegas to get married and meet my wife. That is probably the most anxious I have ever been in my life. I mean, I can pretty well much cope with things, set still, but on that flight, I mean, I was like a kid at Christmas time. That was a big deal to me. I
Yeah.
was 33 when I got married, and I guess you could say I got married kind of late in life. But I had did a lot of racing up to that point.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah, and there really, there wasn't. I just, just sometimes, they trying to date somebody in race could be, they conflicted a lot of times,
Yeah.
and a lot of my relationships didn't last very long because of
Yeah.
I'm going racing.
Racing is it's tough on relationships.
So I'm now married, and I take this stuff very personal. That is one thing. I take it very personal. I want to do good. When we don't, I'm not very happy about it, and a lot of that comes from it's kind of funny. I back up to the second race I went to with the McGuires when I told you about, when they were needing help. We went to Motor Mile, or Pulaski County then. No, it was New River Valley. You got to remember, I call it everything under the sun.
Yeah, I know. It was for Pulaski, then New River, then Sheeler Motor Mile, and now it's
it would have been New River Valley then. Ronnie was running up there. Ronnie had the Dodge, and it had the 500 carburetor on it. The rest of us, we ran the 350s on our Chevrolet built motors, and we finished second to Ronnie up there on the first race. We wasn't far off of him, him having that Dodge had some motor, and they kind of moved the rules around through the years to get those cars to have an advantage to get people to run. I never will forget, we finished second to Ronnie, and I mean, I thought that was just the greatest thing in the world. We did finish second. I was with the team that finished second at New River Valley. I mean, big deal, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
all excited about it. And there's the man by the name of Mike Dillon, and I mean, not the Mike Dillon from RCR, but just big Mike Dillon from Roanoke. He helped Tony forever. He'd been involved in racing. He turns around and looks at me, and he let me have it. He said, "I don't know what you're so excited about." He said, "We did not come here to finish second. We come here to win."
Hey, you guys, what's so bad about second?
Screw second.
Oh.
And that's the only thing we will do. Do you understand? Yes, sir. So we fast forward a little bit, and Tony made the comment to Timmy one time. He said I had become quite an a-hole, and and I love to. I mean, them guys were a lot like brothers to me, older brothers. I mean, because I worked for them for 10 years the first time, and Timmy told Tony, he said he was a nice guy when he first started helping. He said y'all kind of created that monster, and to be honest with you, there is a big sense of urgency in racing. If you're, what is it they say? Racing's all about speed. It don't matter whether you're working on them, racing them, whatever. It's who can do it the fastest and the best. And I developed quite an attitude about wanting to do good, and when we didn't do good, taking it personal. And it was kind of funny because my wife, she, since we had been married and she had been around me, I had worked in the shop and didn't really get quite that, upset about it. And we go to the racetrack and start racing with Michael, and she had really a tough time understanding how I could come home so mad about something, but couldn't wait to go do it again next week. And, and that's a big thing about being competitive and wanting to win, and I find myself a lot of times, being very, like I said, taking it personal and taking it to heart, and having a lot of heart in it. There's a funny story, and I wish my buddy, it's better to hear him tell it, but I got a friend named Will Sadler that lives in Salisbury, and I met him through working on the 611. Come to find out, he had a road race car, and then we worked on the J there for quite a while. And with this deal with Kyle, I said something to him about, I said, hey, we were going to run 2 cars at South Boston two years ago. I said, hey, you want to come to the track with us and help? He's like, yeah, man, I'd love to. So he drives to South Boston, helps us. And then later on, we were going to run the last race at Franklin County. And we had a little bit of an issue over there with some of the track officials and some things that happened. They Kyle went over and won about every time he goes there. And there was a debate.
Just to set so people know, right now you're talking about something a little more up to date. Kyle is the race driver of the race car that you are working on now.
Working on that. Kyle Dudley, yeah. Me and the race director have a little bit of a debate. We'll call it a debate. So my buddy Will, he's worked on this, on this engine with me for a little bit of time. He's never seen me take anything personal because working on the engine was just fun. I mean, there was really nothing to get mad about. But me and this guy are having this debate, and I mean, it's kind of heated. And Will told some of the people that I work with on the engine, he goes, first thing, he said, I didn't know he cussed like that. He said, and I didn't know that guy could get that mad. Will told me, he said, you and him were arguing. He said, I tapped you on the shoulder and asked you, was this for real? Are y'all joking with each other? And I told him, I said, dude, I don't remember you talking to me.
Jeez.
Said, that's how mad I was about this, because this had boiled over from a deal where we were there before, And I done had enough, and I've known this guy for a long, long time, but I was wanting to let him know that I'm not happy with the way, we were treated here. And he was letting me know that, he felt like he was doing, what his job was. But it was just funny for somebody that had been, because, like I said, I met up with Will in 2017, and he had been around me that long and had never seen. Because he went back and told a bunch of them from the engine crew. He's like, man, Tom Mayer is another guy that was on the engine crew. And Tom called me and he said, hey, he said, I heard you get a little upset. He said, I just don't see it. He said, because I've never seen it the whole time I've been around you. And Will was like, yeah. He said, Will said, there's a whole nother side to that guy. But Will told me, he said, man, I love it. Because he said, it tells me that you have passion. Because I kept telling him sometimes I would get into, once again, we'll call them debacles, with the race team, where I would have an opinion or speak my opinion, and it would cause waves, which there's a lot of that in this business. There's a lot of people that have opinions about how things should be done, especially when you're not running good. And not everybody agrees on all the same parts of it. But anyway, to get back to, I'm racing with Michael, and Michael, once again, I tell people with Michael, I can still remember when his mom came into the Little Chef restaurant out on Williamson Road, and we were all out there eating lunch, and Rhonda said, that she was pregnant. And
how long you been around with it?
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of funny because as Michael got a little older and he started coming to the race shop and to the car lot, we become big buddies. He would come back there and want to hang out. I never will forget, we had an old set of sawhorses we set a work table up on, and he seen the drill. He was probably 4 or 5, and he said, what's that? And I said, well, that's a drill. He goes, how's that work? I said, well, you used to drill holes. He said, drill holes. I said, yes. I handed him a thing. I said, drill in the side of that wooden sawhorse. He's back there. He's got that drilled. I mean, it looks like somebody shot it with a shotgun by the time he's done. Well, this was the second time. His mom walks in and sees him with the drill, and she has a fit. We become very close. He found out that I played some rec league ice hockey from 98 till about 2003, just for something for exercise, And Michael found out I was playing. He come and watched one of my rec league games one night, and he decided he wanted to start playing. So, and he played on up. I think he still plays some adult league now. So that was something kind of I got him into. But when he was old enough to run the late model races, Timmy says, "Come up here and go to work." And we ran the full season at then what was Sheila Motor Mile in 2011. Into 2011, Timmy started telling me he was going to buy a K&N Pro car, the K&N E-Series. So they went down and bought a car turnkey from Germain Racing. And we brought it back to Roanoke, brought it to the shop. We started going to Motor Mile, and Mark Huff from Huff Chevrolet. Mark had ran that series with some other people, and he had gotten hooked up with Timmy, and he liked Michael. And we decided, we got this car sometime in late October, early November, and it was still some good weather. So we got it ready. We went to Motor Mile and actually turned laps in it. Started doing some testing in it and getting Michael familiar with the car at a track where he was familiar. And worked on the car during the winter. Got the engine refreshened up, got the car ready to go, and they were the opening race for the K&N series in 2012 was going to be at Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a test. They had a test up there the weekend of the matter of fact, I think that's the same year that Montoya hit the jet dryer.
Oh,
and they ran that 500 on Monday. They had a test that Monday, It was supposed to be the Monday after Daytona. I remember we was riding home and listening to the race, and I remember them talking about Montoya hitting the jet drive. But so went up there and tested at Bristol. Had a really, really good test, and went back to Bristol to race that weekend. And I didn't really know, the truck series, when we went to IRP, a lot of times you had to unload, take the stuff out. And then Martinsville's the same way. Bristol they parked us at the drag strip. They did tech inside the racetrack, let us leave our toolboxes in the racetrack, took our tow rigs to the drag strip, had a deal out there with us for one day. Then when it come time to practice for the race weekend, we drove the cars into the racetrack from the drag strip.
Oh, boy.
Practice.
That's a distance.
Had to take the cars. Oh yeah, had to take the cars back out of the racetrack. It was kind of a, it was a little bit of it was an ordeal.
Yeah.
To get stuff in and out, but we made it okay. Went up there, run the race. I think we finished in the top 10, banged the car up a little bit, had to have the body fixed on it. It was still a steel body car at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Fixed that car, took it to Richmond. I think we finished 6th at Richmond. I think it was 6 or 7. I think we were 4th at Bristol maybe, and finished. We finished top 10 in our first 2 races. We were somewhere around 6th to 8th with those two. Richmond.
At this point, how old is Michael?
So this would have been 2012, and he was born in 96, so he's 17 or 18.
Okay. Boy.
Yeah, and he's
got some racing under his belt.
Oh yeah, I mean he's I don't think he started out. He got one of those kid kart go-karts, I think for his 5th birthday.
Okay.
And we started out. That was a whole interesting deal of taking a 5-year-old to the go-kart track and keeping his attention on, because he was riding the go-kart, that was fine. But when the go-kart wasn't racing, and trying to talk to him about what was going on, he was more interested in, other things. But he become quite a great little go-kart racer. And like I said, he won multiple Virginia State and Tennessee State championships before they decided when he was able, they was going to put him in a car with a roll cage and keep it safe. Because he had a couple horrendous go-kart crashes. That there were several go-kart, which I'm finding out in a lot of that stuff they do. They have a lot of bad wrecks in them things.
Oh yeah, I've seen them.
But we ran the K&N series. We went to Bristol, Richmond, and Loudon. Once again, we got another top 10 at Loudon. And there's some good people running. If you go back and look, Chase Elliott was running that series in 2012. Ryan Blaney was in it. Corey LaJoy was still running it. Bubba was still in it.
Mm-hmm. It was a very serious series.
It was. Rev. I'm trying to remember who was driving Rev's cars. That was really real. There was some good people racing that series. He wanted to go race at Bowman Gray, and his dad was like, "Nah, we're not going there," because that, we went and watched that race, and then it was about like the Clash the other night. There was one car that ended up on the wall down there.
Yeah, so, that's a brutal place.
Yeah, and Timmy was like, for what it costs to fix these bodies, I'm not taking that car there. And in 2013, we went to Bristol, won the pole. We went to Bristol, won the pole, was leading. Caution come out, just slapped this guy. And he didn't slow down, run over us, and spun us out.
Oh.
So didn't tear the car up. So we come back through the field. We got all the way back to, I think we got back to second in that race. I think is what it was. I think we wound up finishing second. Went back to Richmond, ran Richmond again, and Richmond was okay. They decided they were going to have the race at Bristol, or not Bristol, but VIR, and we borrowed a car from Rick Ware. He had a road course car, and Timmy had worked out some kind of deal that I don't know. They had some kind of deal. We went to VIR. We tested up there. At the end of the test, right at the end of practice on Friday, or they had a test day on Friday, and then you had the race day on Saturday. I think's how it was. He run off the track and got in the tire barrier, and I mean, it knocked the deck lid off. There was a group of us there with it, and we patched it up and put it back together, and we made the race, and we got to run the road race. It was not, we don't think we finished in the top 10 at that race. I think that was the first time we'd been out of the top 10 in one of them races. About that time, a buddy of mine had called me, Jason Miller, which I had worked with at Mr. Harris's. He was one of the crew chiefs for Bobby Dotter. He needed people to come to Bristol and help him with the truck. So I agreed to come to Bristol and help him. And that was the week before the race at VIR. A friend of mine, Lenny Chandler, was the shop foreman. Well, no, he wasn't. He had just got hired at NTS, which was the team that Bob Newberry owned that was in the old Kevin Harvick building. So they called me up and they said, hey, we heard you're going to be at Bristol. Why don't you go over and talk to Bruce Cook while you're there? He'll be on Hornaday's truck. Because Hornaday was driving for NTS. They're looking for a suspension guy. So we got a little break there, and I went over and introduced myself to Bruce, talked to him for a second, And he said, well, I'd like to have you come by the shop and look at the shop. So the truck race was Wednesday night at Bristol. Thursday, went back to the shop, finished up the road course car, got it loaded up, and I rode down to the old KHI and went in there and looked around, talked to Bruce, and he told me, he said, well, I'll call you and give you an answer. So he called me Friday afternoon and said, hey, I'll hire you. This is what I'll pay you if you're interested. When can you start? I said, well, when do you need me to start? He said, well, I said, I kind of got to give a notice here. He said, can you give it a couple days and then be on down? I was like, yeah, let me talk to him. Well, the deal with the road course, there was some debates about whether we should have went or not. I thought there was stuff we should have bought for the other cars instead of wasting the money going to this road race. I'd never been a part of any road racing. I had talked to some people about, especially the truck series, because the truck series did go to Watkins Glen at one point. By the time I got on to the truck series, they didn't go there no more. But one of the crew chiefs, Kevin Cram, he had told me a little bit about road racing stuff in the truck series and suspension parts and all that. But one of the interesting things that happened to us at VIR when we were testing was the car cut off, and we were kind of trying to figure out what was happening, and it wouldn't start. They had to get a hot tow and get him back to the pits. And I remember asking our tire guy, I said, because Tony asked me, he said, what do you think's wrong with it? And I thought for a minute, and I said, looked at Randy, and I said, how many laps have we run here practicing? He said, well, we ain't run but about 20 laps. And I said, we're out of gas. Tony went, dude, he just said 20 laps. I said, yeah, but it's 2.5 miles around this place on and off the throttle. Well, sure enough, we brought it back to the pits and started putting gas in it. We run the kid out of gas, and I remember Tony was like, dude, we're going to have to pit now. I said, yeah. I said, I'm realizing that now, that this is going to be, like I said, they had no road course experience. I had no road course experience. This was a learning weekend. Yeah, but at the end of the day, Michael got to run a road race, but I really think, the effort, my opinion, the efforts could have been put There's stuff we could have bought for the circle track cars, put towards the program. So this opportunity come about, and once again, I really hated to leave them, especially as quick as I had to take this job, but it's what I needed to do. I remember being over there with his mini stock and working. People knew I worked for a truck team, and they were like, "What are you doing over here working on mini stock?" It was a good deal. It started out, they had Hornaday there. His son Brendan Newberry was driving. They had a thing called Core 24, which was like a spray. I mean, this is long before COVID, but it was a spray. Trying to think of the right name.
Disinfectant.
Disinfectant, but. He had a big military contract on this thing, and I mean, the money was supposed to be, it really went off the rails midway through 15. Bob wasn't exactly, money was tight. He wasn't paying the bills the way they were supposed to be. We went to Homestead. We took 3 trucks to Homestead. I remember I got to go to that one with the 3rd truck. Scott Lagacy actually drove that truck. Finished 1, 2. And so I called Micah back, and I said, "Hey, did something happen?" He said, "Yeah." He said, the 10 car failed the sniffer test. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, it was sucking air." The 10 car got disqualified with AJ Allmendinger, but what had happened, RCR runs the Roush interrupter. We run the kill switch. Well, the plug in the back of the intake fell out where the vacuum has to hook up to that Roush interrupter system. What they were going to do was, instead of this car going to the wind tunnel and then going to Texas, they were going to put this car in a hauler. They were going to use a hauler from RCR and send this brand new car to Kansas for Ross. Then COVID came, and that was a really weird deal.
That was a bizarre time.
It was. We went to Atlanta, and I remember, they canceled Atlanta, and the hauler's coming back, and the calendar that was in the suspension room just skipping over April and putting it on May. And I thought, man, it's like there's no recollection of April at all. And then Justin Haley was in the next one. He was in the top 5 in that one. And then we went to Talladega, I think it was, and won with him. So I think there was 4 Dash for Cash races, and we won 3 of them. Indy was the first one I went to in 2020, and it was weird because, COVID was still going on. It was like going to test. There was no fans at the racetrack.